Okay, so maybe you've heard about this book, Red, White, and Royal Blue, and you're thinking, sounds kind of interesting, but is it actually any good?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
Yeah, that's what we do in these deep dives, right? We help you figure out if a book is worth your time.
Exactly. No spoilers, just the info you need to decide if you want to add it to your reading list or not.
And for this
Yeah.
particular deep dive, we're talking romance. We've got an expert here who knows a lot about the genre.
I do love a good love story.
So what's the verdict? Is Red, White, and Royal Blue a must-read for romance fans?
Well, I'll say this. It's definitely a fun, light read, especially if you enjoy that enemies to lovers kind of thing.
Ooh, enemies to lovers. Classic. And I gotta admit, the whole first son of the U.S. falling for a Prince of England, that's a pretty unique twist.
It takes the whole forbidden love trope and puts it on a global stage.
Yeah, I mean, talk about high stakes. Not only do they have to deal with the usual family drama and relationship stuff, but they've got the whole world watching. Like, how could they even have a secret date? Wouldn't the paparazzi be all over them?
You'd think so, right? But the book kind of glosses over some of those logistical issues.
So, not exactly realistic then.
Not always, no. But it is fun. I mean, there's a scene where they sneak off to a gay bar in West Hollywood. It's treated as this casual thing, but in reality, with their level of security, it would be impossible.
Yeah, that does stretch the limits of believability a bit.
A bit.
Okay, so maybe not the most realistic portrayal of secret royal rendezvous. What about the writing itself? I've seen some pretty mixed reviews online about the author's style.
Yeah, the writing style is definitely a bit polarizing. Some people love the snappy dialogue and all the pop culture references. They find it relatable and fun. But some people think the writing is a bit too simple, maybe even juvenile.
Hmm. So you're either going to love it or hate it, huh?
Pretty much. For example, there's this line where the author just straight up says, they grew up made to talk about their feelings a lot, instead of actually, showing us that through their interactions.
Ah, so it's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing.
Sometimes, yeah. Like the author doesn't quite trust the reader to get it unless it's spelled out for us.
Okay, I can see how that would be frustrating for some readers.
Naturally.
Another thing that makes me hesitant is the political aspect. I've seen some criticisms that the book's portrayal of politics is a little too idealistic.
Oh, for sure. Both the US and the UK political systems are presented in this very optimistic light, which might not sit well with everyone, especially considering the world we live in today.
Right. Like, is it trying to be a political commentary or is it just pure escapism?
I'd say it leans more towards escapism. It's like this fantasy world where progressive values always win and love conquers all. For instance, there's this whole subplot about a leaked email scandal that just kind of gets brushed aside like it's no big deal. In the real world, a scandal like that could have serious consequences.
Totally. So it sounds like we've got a potentially unbelievable romance, a writing style that's a bit hit or miss, and a maybe overly optimistic take on politics.
So far, yeah. But there are some things Red, White, and Royal Blue does really well.
Like what?
Well, for one, it's got really great LGBTQ plus representation.
Okay, tell me more about that.
It's not just a love story, it's also about Alex, the first son, coming to terms with his bisexuality. We see his internal struggles, his coming out process, and how he deals with being in a same-sex relationship while being in the public eye. It's done with a lot of heart and humor.
That's awesome. How does it compare to other books with similar themes, like
Fine.
Chasing Liberty? That one also involves a romance with the president's kid, right?
Right, but Red, White, and Royal Blue is much more satirical about politics. It's not just about escaping from a high-profile life. It's about navigating those pressures while also questioning the systems that create them.
Interesting. And what about the overall tone? Is it similar to, say, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue? Because that one also features a romance between two guys.
The Gentleman's Guide is a historical novel with a more serious tone. Red, White, and Royal Blue is definitely a modern romantic comedy. It's got that lighthearted, almost sitcom-like feel, kind of like Parks and Recreation.
But unlike Parks and Rec, it actually tackles LGBTQ plus issues head on.
Exactly. It shows the challenges queer people face, especially those in the public eye.
Okay, so it sounds like a fun comedic read with a unique political angle and a strong emphasis on LGBTQ plus representation. But I've also seen some criticism about how the book handles those LGBTQ plus themes. Some say it's groundbreaking, while others say it relies on stereotypes.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of different opinions out there. Some readers, especially those in the LGBTQ plus community, really connected with Alex's story. They found his journey to be relatable and validating.
That makes sense. What about the criticisms? What didn't people like?
Some felt that Henry, the prince, fell into the tragic gay royal trope.
Ah, I see.
His character, at least initially, is very much defined by duty and societal expectations, which some people found a bit too simplistic and potentially problematic.
So it sounds like the book tries to be progressive and inclusive, but maybe doesn't always get it quite right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
It definitely seems like a book that sparks a lot of conversation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But before we get into all that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and really dig into whether Red, White, and Royal Blue is worth your time.
Okay, so we've talked about the good and the bad, and maybe even the kind of ugly when it comes to Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Right. So the big question is, should you actually read it?
I think it really depends what you're looking for in a book.
Yeah.
Like if you want a deep dive into political strategy or like super nuanced exploration of LGBTQ plus issues, this might not be the book for you.
So who would you recommend it to? Who's the target audience here?
I think it's perfect for anyone who wants like a fun, lighthearted, escape.
Especially if they love those enemies to lovers stories.
Right, yeah.
With witty banter and a lot of optimism.
Speaking of enemies to lovers, does it feel fresh in this book, or does it just kind of fall into cliche?
I think it actually does a good job of making it feel fresh, especially with that whole international politics backdrop.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, I don't like you because you're you.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's all these layers of like historical tension and cultural differences between their countries.
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
It's not just purely personal.
Exactly. And they're forced to work together, right? So you get all these funny misunderstandings and arguments, and then slowly that turns into something more.
Okay, that actually sounds pretty cute. But I'm still not totally sold on the whole politics thing,
Yeah.
Like, does the book ever acknowledge that real-world politics are messy?
Not really.
No.
It's very idealistic.
Really?
Like, it paints this picture of a world where a young, charming first son
Right.
can just change people's minds by being himself.
So it's more of a fantasy than a realistic take on politics.
I would say so.
Okay,
But, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of fantasy, right? Sometimes you just want a story that makes you feel good.
totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like a feel-good story with maybe a little too much fantasy. What about the ending? Is it satisfying?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a happy ending.
Okay, but does it feel earned? Like,
Yeah.
did the author do a good job of getting us there?
I think that's where some readers might have a problem.
How so?
Some people felt like the ending was a little too neat, a little too rushed, like the author just wanted to tie everything up in a bow.
Okay, so maybe a little bit too much like a fairy tale ending.
Maybe. But I also think that's part of what makes it so enjoyable. It's that escapism, that hopefulness.
I get that. Sometimes you just need a happy ending.
Exactly. And that's really what Red, White, and Royal Blue is all about. It's that feeling of, hope and joy, even when the world outside feels a little bit chaotic.
So for our listeners who are trying to decide if they should read it, what's your final verdict?
I would say if you're looking for a light and fun read with a unique premise and a really charming romance,
Yeah?
give it a try.
Okay.
Just don't go into it expecting like some hardcore political thriller
Right.
or super deep exploration of LGBTQ plus issues.
Got it.
Go into it wanting something light and feel good.
And you might just learn a thing or two about international relations while you're at it.
Or at least get some ideas for your next trip to London.
Or DC.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered a lot here today. We talked about the good, the bad, the writing, the characters.
Pretty much everything.
Hopefully we've given you enough to think about to make your own decision about Red, White, and Royal Blue. Before we go, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Oh.
We've talked a lot about the book idealizing politics and simplifying things. But is there value in that? I mean, does fiction always have to be 100% realistic? Or can it also offer us a vision of something better?
That's a great question, and I think it's something you should definitely consider as you're reading Red, White, and Royal Blue. Does the escapism outweigh the potential for oversimplification? You decide.
And let us know what you think.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your perspective. You can find us on social media or leave a comment below.
Well, that just about does it for our deep dive into Red, White, and Royal Blue.
I think we covered it all, didn't we?
Yeah, pretty much. The characters, the writing, that whole political angle, and of course the romance itself.
All the important stuff.
Exactly. So hopefully now you, dear listener, have a better idea of whether this book is for you.
Remember, it's all about finding what you enjoy. Not every book is going to be for
It's
everyone.
true. So until next time, happy reading.
And may your TBR pile be ever in your favor.